go into that 19th century in the United States and examine the thinking. Martin Delany, a great Jamaican, Robert Campbell, who went out to Nigeria, Abeokuta, to search for a place with Martin Delany. You dare to look at the work of the non-fiction work of the first black novelist, William Wells Brown, the female anti-slavery speakers, Elaine Watkins, Harriet Tubman, Sojourner Truth. You dare to look at the finest single mind produced in the United States by black Americans in the 19th century, Frederick Douglass. A look at his conflict with Russwell and others over whether to settle in Liberia or not to settle. Douglass took a principled position that was right, and his opposition was also right. Too many times you've been trained by the movies to look for the good guy and the bad guy in the drama, when sometimes you got dramas with all bad guys, you got dramas with all good guys. You don't necessarily have to have a bad guy. Douglass was not a bad guy because he opposed the African migration movement. He said that we had earned our right to stay in this country with our blood and our sweat and our death, and he was right. Delany and others, Campbell, Russwell, said that the opening up of Liberia, the settlement of Liberia, gives us an opportunity to prove to the world we once ruled great states and could do it again, and they were right. So we're not dealing with right or wrong here. We deal with two rights in conflict. And your American movie mind won't let you deal with two rights in conflict, because you still haven't dealt with the two rights in conflict in relationship to W.E.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington, where both of them were right then, both of them were right now.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
We did not need to divide, say, Booker T. Washington or W.E.B. Du Bois. We needed Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois. Both of them had something to contribute to our own salvation as a people. Then you need to look at the end of that 19th century, when Africans began to send forth great thinkers. You need to look at the life of Edmund Blyton and look at his inaugural address on liberal education, Liberia College, 1881. And look at the Caribbean thinkers, Blyton, others that followed Blyton. Blyton was from the Danish West Indies at the time. And understand that great thinking, great challenges, opening up questions not new to us.
All right, gentlemen. Welcome back to Breakdown Friday. Joseph Ward, Professor Carl Tone Jones, Patrick Irvin. We are here back on the shoulders of giants. If this is your first time being here, welcome. I appreciate you tuning in, and I hope you enjoy what you hear. All my returning viewers, I appreciate you all. I love you all. So let's get into it. You see the clip from Dr. John Henrik Clarke. Basically getting down to one of the things, a conversation Pat PC and I have had for years. Pat phrases it as two things can be true at the same time. And that's one of the main points Dr. Clarke is getting at we always seem to end up in conflict or debate because people have um, opposite ideas, or somebody may disagree with somebody else, but it always leads to conflict and debate. But before we get into that, he started talking about great African thinkers, and he ended talking about great African thinkers. So that's the point where I want to start about our thinkers. So thinkers are needed. Black thinkers are needed. But in 2023, I believe, and we've had conversations, but I'll put it on me. I believe that the role of the thinker has changed a bit because our situation is a lot more dire than it was in the past. So I want to start with you, Pat. Um, thinkers are needed, but in your opinion, has the role of the thinker changed? Can thinkers only just be thinkers in 2023, or do we need more from our thinkers and our intellectuals in 2023?
Um, I don't. So yes, I do think thinkers are needed. I don't think the time period is what has changed what's required of our thinkers. I think it's the society we live in, the structures we have in place. All societies, regardless of where you are in the power structure, uh, when you're in your infancy and you don't control anything, you don't have set up systems established around you to support your thinking. You have to do more than think. That's what comes with building that process. You go back into American history, you start thinking about your Benjamin Franklins and all of those people who are known as great thinkers and doers. They had to be, because there was no system built up to support just thinking. Then as things got put in place, you start seeing the segmentation or the stratification of society, where you start seeing the thinkers being supported by doers. So now the think tanks don't need cat programs no more, community action programs no more. They can sit back and come up with plans because there's a group of doers that's going to execute those plans. But before you get to that point, you have to do other things besides think. I think the black community, it doesn't matter the time period. Um, that to me is another one of those, we're modeling our surroundings without understanding why our surroundings work the way they work. White people and other groups that have more systems and things in place, institutions in place, they can afford to have their extremely intelligent people sit in a room, read books, and create theory, because there's an entire structure surrounding them that's going to transfer those theories into practical applications that they can then analyze to refine those theories. So I think the role of the thinker in the black community has just been poorly defined all the way up until, I think, Chancellor Williams really was the first author I saw. Well, Harold Cruz in a little bit with The Crisis of the Negro Intellectual, written in the 60s. But Chancellor Williams was the first person I read directly speak to the fact that black thinkers need to do more than just think and theorize. They need to get out there and get involved, um, and 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 show people as well. It's not just about creating a theory. Get out there and do it. And he went so far as to even say you have to also present your thinking in a way that people consuming it don't have to think about it, because of where he saw us as a community. Um, the average black person, paraphrasing his estimation, didn't have the time or the energy or the know-how to interpret things in a way that was beneficial for the collective.
Right.
So when a black thinker presented information, they had to present it in such a way that all of the necessary thinking was done for the average black person, so they could just consume it and do something. So we're not even doing that.
Right. Because you have to get them to a point to where they can now begin to critically think.
Right.
and the info. So because it's how you serve people. You learn how to serve people, actually serving people and being successful at serving people, because there are groups of people who serve people, but I wouldn't necessarily call them successful, because if you measure it as far as a tangible outcome, you won't see any. So being able to learn how to properly serve people, we all been through this, but Pat, we've been through it with the community service and stuff that we've done in the past that have failed. We learned this by actually failing, about how you actually serve people. But that's the process of giving people information that's digestible, giving people information in a way that is that they can actually practically use it, but also coming out of the ivory towers, coming from behind the desk, taking the white coats off, all the intellectuals, taking the intellectual white coat off, getting into the community and connecting with the people that you are supposedly are helping or doing the research for, because there has to be a connection. But like you say, we already have enough evidence to show that intellectuals or even any other people from successful realms, when the community can't see you, when the community can't interact with you, you don't exist. You're ineffective. So PC, same thing to you. Thinkers. Yes, thinkers are needed, but has the role of the thinker changed? And do you also think that thinkers need to come out of the ivory towers and get into the communities and get active and do more than just think?
Kind of, not
Mhm.
necessarily full blown, because I think a lot of our thinkers are just too well known. So a lot of our thinkers become celebrities because they think and they speak on things they think of, and it becomes something popular. So the integrity of creating an idea and then building on an idea gets lost in the perpetual, adrenaline rush that comes from one of my posts going viral. Something I'm thinking, and it's a viral moment, so it's being shared by everyone now, and I'm the celebrity in the spotlight to hit. I think Patrick brought up a good example. The so-called founding fathers of this country. Well, they are the founding fathers of this country. You know, um, a lot of their thought leaders, and that's what this is. We have thinkers, they're thought leaders. A lot of it is generating, at the turn of the 18th century when the American Revolution was fought. Prior to that, you had Thomas Paine writing, his periodicals and Time and Sense. You had Benjamin Franklin, who also had a different pen name, but they were also feeding that revolutionary fervor. Something we speak about in the Independence Day Project. They actually took it off the paper, and actually they took it off the streets, and they actually put it right here in Philadelphia in Independence Mall. And they all signed their name to a document called the Declaration of Independence. That was taking it off, bringing them out into the public and actually, putting them out in the field, out of the ivory towers, because they became known as terrorists, and they became enemies of the state. If they would have gotten caught, they would have been drawn and quartered, or executed for going up against the crown of Britain at the time. I think when I think about it in the perspective of a thought leader has to be a visionary. And one thing, and Pat hit on several good points. Visionary has to present a clear picture to you. I think one of the biggest issues in terms of liberation pushes or people who identify as liberators today is that they don't have a vision of what it looks like. They only know to react and respond. That was one of the purposes. See, and I just want to take this around the world real quick and bring it back so it makes sense. When I was I always say black children, the futures of black children was the primary motivator for the Independence Day Project. And one of the things I noticed was how children in Africa were going to junkyards and finding ways to power up their villages. That because there's a lot of communities in Africa without flowing power grid. So they were finding out ways to generate power, to generate light, to create lighting for 4 to 6 hours a day, which was huge in a village that didn't have access to it. I said to myself, because as a therapist, I had worked with white children out in the county of Philadelphia. I got to see how children who are not oppressed get to be creative. They get to think outside the box. They get to visualize themselves saving the day. Cowboys, Indians, they're some type of space pirate or whatever. But they get to have this fantasy because they lived in a world where they weren't oppressed, and oppression kills dreams. So when I created the Independence Day Project film, one of the things that I thought about, I want Black children to have the freedom to be, to be able to think outside the box, to not necessarily have to think, damn, we need lights for our village. Let's try to come up with a way to gain some solar power or to create a generator out of parts from a junkyard to generate electricity so that, my little sister can read her book and get her schoolwork done. So that was the purpose behind it, is creating a vision of what Black liberation looks like, to be a liberated people, by utilizing a film that piece by piece breaks it down to you. So, and I'm not using this as a shameless plug. What I'm trying to say is our thought leaders need this day and age, need to be more than just charismatic leaders. They need to be visionaries, but not only visionaries. We need to be able to create not just thought leaders, but think tanks that have the opportunity and to operate in a way where they're actually breaking down systemically the issues of the community and the best practices at fixing what's wrong, improving on situations, improving on scholarship in school. So you have a school district that decide we're not going to teach African American studies this semester. Fine. We already had that in our contingency plan. So our plan was already to institute Saturday morning schools in which we provide breakfast, meals, education, physical fitness for our children. That's proactive thinking in a community, and it's already going to be funded because we already planned for this. This is why I think that and I'm going over my notes because I think that once you create that clear vision of what it looks like, and once you have think tanks that operate in it, then I think that puts us in a better position to not necessarily get caught up in reacting to everything and the demoralization of a people. They have to see it in action, as you said earlier.
Yeah. Well, to me, it sounds like we're talking about an educated class with no structure. And when you don't have structure, you're going to have chaos. And this chaos comes in the form of conflict and debate. This chaos comes in the form of, I think you are out to sabotage me. I think you're out to get me resentment, looking at somebody who looks like you as an enemy because their ideas are opposite of yours or they disagree with your idea. But even, I don't like the term thought leader, and that's just my issue because it sounds scammy, but that's just my issue. I'm not saying it is, that's just my issue. And I can recognize that. But the thinkers, Pat said something, but both of you said a version of it. Being able to have a class of people who are able to only think, only concentrate on thinking and like the think tank. Having a class of people who can only do that because there's a structure within the system that they exist in that allows them to do that. They have the luxury to only be thinkers. I just believe that our situation is such dire now that we need as many hands on deck as possible, like as far as in the trenches doing tangible things. Yes, we still need an intellectual class. Yes, we need a class of thinkers. We need think tanks, but we need a system to support them so that they can just do that. And it don't look like we're at that point. You all can tell me, how many think tanks would you say we, like black think tanks, that we have in America that you know of?
Besides the Harvest Institute, I can't think of one, and I won't even say that one's like fully functional, for the simple fact that, like, yeah, they're doing think tank work, but it's not.
So right,
It's not on scale with the white think tanks.
Right.
Right.
There's no community action arm.
There you go.
Yeah. So
There's no
you took one
environment.
out with that. And that's the one
Yeah.
that Dr. Claude Anderson put together, and how he was able to generate the information for Powernomics and all his other great works. And and it's funny because I researched this a few years ago, and at the time it was like about 125 multi-million-dollar think tanks in America alone. And every major corporation has a think tank. And I'm just talking about think tanks that actually identify as think tanks.
Right.
And I'm not talking about law firms. I'm not talking about lobbyists. I'm not talking about any of those other groups.
It's within these firms. It's within
right.
them.
So, we that Willie Lynch shit really pinned us down, because we can't get along to save our lives. And even if our lives depend on it, we will die on the sword rather than, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that not only did the separation, I mean, we came here separated as a people, different tribes, that, some of them were warring with each other for, centuries, and came to America and had to be, shackled with each other and forced to operate under a foreign system that stripped them of all type of any other kind of native communication skills we might have had, spiritual systems and languages and so forth. And then when you have the fact that, okay, so black folk finally figured out that we need to get along enough to at least break the chains, then you had the Willie Lynch, syndrome kick in. And what you see right now is a lot of black people have been so indoctrinated. I would say all of us have, ourselves included, to see black people through the lens of white people. So we all look at black people as inferior. We walk in a room full of sharp, smart black people, and I've heard so many brothers and sisters say, I start to, when I walk into a room, I size everybody up. And I'm like, what's the point of sizing everybody up if one of the first things people say is leave your ego at the door?